Okay, so we're looking at the seventh appearance of Jesus who rose from the dead, and this was to 7 disciples at the Sea of Tiberias or the Sea of Galilee. And so if you think about it, this is where it all started. This is where those disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, were fishing when Jesus called them. He said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And so, someone read verse 3 in John chapter 21.
Simon Peter saith unto them, I go fishing. They say unto him, We also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing.
Okay, so I remember Frank at our church, he would miss church sometimes to go to Gideon's meetings, and Papa would always aggravate him when he came back. I know you was laying out fishing. And then one time, Frank wasn't there, so Papa had to open up Sunday school, and he got the book out. He was reading, he was so serious. He said, Simon Peter saith unto them, I go a fishing. And he said, that must have been what somebody said to Frank this morning. He said, well, I'll go with you. But so Peter said, I'm going fishing. And they said, well, we'll go with you. So why was this bad of them?
They turned back to their old profession.
Yes, so they had went back to their old life. They had went back to what they did before they met Jesus. And so it says they immediately got in the ship and they caught nothing. And I remember Papa saying, when you're fishing when you ought not to be, then you ought not to catch anything. And so think about it. These men were professionals. They were professional fishermen, but they didn't catch a thing. All right, someone read verse 4.
But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus.
So when the morning was now come, so think about what a beautiful scene that would be. The sun coming up over the shore of the Sea of Galilee. But there was something more beautiful, and that was the sun, S-O-N, coming up and standing on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. But they did not recognize it was him. And so then, I like this one, he hollered and he said, children, have you any meat? So he said, have you caught anything? They said, no. So they were mad they hadn't caught anything. But if they had caught something, they'd been saying, yeah, I caught one this long, I caught one this long, I was this long. But they were mad, so they said, no. And so this is probably the first time Peter didn't open his mouth. And so think about it. This is a question that he may ask every one of us one day. Did you catch anything? And so think about it. We need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to win souls to Jesus? And first of all, we need to ask ourselves, where are we getting our bait? So are we going to worldly shops and getting our bait? If we go there, then we're just going to be getting bad attitudes, cursing, drinking, laying out of church, negativity, and you're not going to win any souls to Jesus with that. But if we go to spiritual shops, his shops, then we'll get a smile, compassion, love, the Word of God, and that's what will win souls to Jesus. And so every time I go fishing, like if I see a fish swim by, I'll reel in, cast it, try to cast it right in his face, get it right in his mouth if I can. And so, but we don't have to do that. We don't have to go stick the Bible right in their face. So if we just live it, if we live, smile at people, have compassion, show them love, then they will realize there's something different about them, and I want what they have. And so look at what he said in verse 6. He said, cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. And so they might have said, well, we've tried everything else. Might as well. Throw it over there, boys. So they threw it on the right side, and they couldn't draw it in. There was so much. And so he will direct our lives if we will let him. He said, cast the net on the right side. And so we need to ask him, like Paul did, Lord, what will you have me to do? And he will tell us, but then we must obey. And he will also give us instructions on how to witness to people, and he will put people in our lives to witness to. We just have to do it. And so they cast the net on the right side, and they couldn't draw it in. There were so many fish. But the net never broke. And so that represents, remember what he said? He is able to save them to the uttermost that come unto God by him. And he said, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. So all those that come to him, he is able to keep. Okay, and look at verse 7. So they didn't recognize him. But then John, he said, it's the Lord. And so maybe John's mind went back 3 years ago, and he saw him standing on the shore, calling them to come follow him. And now he's having to do it again. But then John realizes, it's the Lord. And Peter couldn't wait to get to him. He jumps in, swims to the shore. And so we talk negative a lot about Peter, but if you notice, Peter, every chance he gets, he tries to get closer to Jesus. Every chance. Remember, he's the one that stepped out on the sea, started walking to him. And so this is a good lesson for us. When the master calls from the shore, cast yourself in. Whatever he says to do, do it. And then verses 8 and 9, so the disciples came in dragging their net, and when they got there, they saw a fire of coals and fish laying on their bread. So Jesus already had fish and bread. He didn't need their fish. But verse 10, he says, now bring the fish that you've caught. And they brought in, dragged the net up, and they had 153 great fish in that net. And so apparently back during this time, there were 153 distinct nations during this time. And so that shows us all people are invited to Jesus. He died for all. He wants to save all. And so this is the last recorded miracle that Jesus did after he arose. And we can learn some important lessons from it. The first one is the Lord uses what people has to perform miracles. So he didn't tell them, boys, go to the store and buy you a reel, rod and reel, then you can catch some fish. But they had a net, and so he used a net to perform a miracle. When the multitude was hungry, he didn't say, go to the store and get them something to eat. But there was a boy there that had 5 loaves and 2 small fishes, and he used it to feed over 5,000. And think about Moses. Moses was making excuses. He said to God, he said, they won't believe me, they won't listen to me. And God said, what is that in your hand? And Moses said, a rod. And we know he did all kinds of things with that rod. And so the lesson here is that whatever we have in our hand, God will use if we will let him. And so we make excuses, like Moses did. I can't speak well, or I'm not smart enough, I don't have enough money. And all David had was a shepherd's crook and a slingshot, and he killed a lion, a bear, and a 9-foot giant with it. And so whatever we have, wherever we are, God can use us if we will let him. And so the second thing we can learn from this miracle is that what God does, he does in abundance. So the net was filled with 153, the Bible says, great fishes. He fed over 5,000, and he had 12 baskets left over. Moses struck the rock with that rod, and enough water came out to water at least over 1 million people and their animals. And so David had a slingshot, but then God gave him a sword. And we know the women sang, they said, Saul had slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And so the third thing we can learn from this is he accepts our service when we obey him. So he already had fish laying there, but he told them, casting it on the right side, they caught fish. And then he said, now bring the fish that you caught. So when we work at his command, when we obey him and do what he says, he will accept what we bring. He will accept our service. All right, let's read verse 12.
Jesus saith unto them, come and dine. And none of the disciples durst ask him, who art thou, knowing that it was the Lord.
So what a sweet invitation coming from Jesus. Come and dine. And so the invitation, come and see, that is at the beginning of our walk with him. That's when, we first get saved, we're still drinking milk. But come and dine, that is after we've walked with him a while, after we've become a more mature Christian, after we've come and taken up the cross and followed him, we've gotten closer to him. So now we're eating meat, now we're eating steak. So come and dine is a closer invitation. If you're dining with someone, you're sitting at the same table with them. So eating with Jesus means you have close fellowship with him and you are close to him. And so Jesus is going to tell his disciples here soon, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. But before he tells them to go, first of all, he tells them to come. Come and dine. Come and spend some time with me for a while. And then look at verse 13. He said, he gave them bread and fish, so they ate with him. And so lesson here is before we go out and witness, we need to first have breakfast with him. We need to be close to him. We need to let him feed us. He is where we get our strength and our nourishment and our instructions. And so do we need to just come and spend time with him before we go out on a mission trip? No. We need to eat breakfast with him every morning because every day is a mission trip. We run into lost people every single day. Like me, I don't even have to go out and find lost people. The Lord has put me into a position where they come to me. I have people come into me every single day. And so I got to realize that and try to be a witness for him to those people. And so now we're going to look at the interview with Jesus and Peter. So Jesus asked Peter 3 questions and Peter gives him 3 responses. So someone read the first one, verse 15.
So when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, lovest thou me more than these? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my lambs.
So let's look at this question. So first of all, he called him Simon. So why did he call him Simon? So think about when Peter first met Jesus, his brother brought him to him. It said Jesus beheld him. He said, Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah, but thou shalt be called Cephas, which means a stone, which means a rock. You're going to be called a rock. So Peter had shown signs of being that rock. Remember when Jesus asked him, he said, Who do you say I am? Peter said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Then that night of the Last Supper in the upper room, Jesus said, All of you shall be offended of me because of this night. Peter said, Everyone else may be offended, but I will never be offended because of you. I will lay down my life for your sake. Then Jesus told him, Will you? He said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, the cock shall not crow until thou hast denied me thrice. So Peter showed signs of being that rock, but Jesus called him Simon, reminding him of his old name, showing him that he'd already went back to his old life and telling him that he is not the rock yet. But we know that Peter will be. He will be that rock. And so look at the question he asked him. Lovest thou me? So in the English language, we have one word for love. But in the Greek language, there are different words for love, and they represent different kinds of love. And so one of them is phileo. And phileo is a brotherly love or like a friendship. And the other one is agapao. And this is the highest kind of love. This goes beyond affections and emotions, and it is demonstrated by actions. This love is sacrificial. It's perfect. And it is unconditional. So this love is the love of God. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And then Jesus lived out this love when he sacrificed himself on the cross. And so this agapao or agape love represents God's perfect, unconditional, sacrificial, immeasurable, incomparable love for us. And it's not just an attribute of him, but it is who he is. Remember what John told us in 1 John? He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. God is love. It's who he is. And so when Jesus asked Peter, Lovest thou me? Jesus used the word agapao. So he was saying, Do you love me with a perfect sacrificial love? But when Peter responded and said, Yea, Lord, you know that I love you, Peter used phileo. So Peter said, I have a brotherly love for you. I have an affection for you. And so why didn't Peter use the word agapao? Because he did not sacrifice him. So I think because Peter is done bragging. So Peter's finished bragging. So never again is he going to brag about what he's going to do. Never again are you going to hear him say he's going to do something big for the Lord. Now he is going to do big things for the Lord, but he's just not going to say anything about it anymore. And so Peter remembers his 3 denials, and he realizes how weak he really is. And so he doesn't dare respond with a strong word like agapao. So Peter comes down to the low plane. He says, Yea, Lord, I have an affection for you. I have a brotherly love for you. And then look at what he said. He said, Do you love me more than these? So what was sitting around there? So the disciples were there, and fish, a net, a boat. And so he's saying, Do you love me more than your old life? And so Peter says, Yea, Lord, you know that I love you. And he says, Then feed my lambs. And so what is spiritual food? The Word of God. And so he says, If you love me, go feed my little lambs with my word. So little lambs are ones that have just been saved. And so tell them my word. Tell them to grow in grace and in the knowledge of me. Tell them that to follow me, you must take up the cross, deny yourself, and follow me daily. Okay? Now let's read the second one, verse 16.
He said to him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonah, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my sheep.
So Jesus asked him again the second time using agape love, but Peter just can't. He responds again with phileo. And we have to admire him for that, because Peter, he had exalted himself. He said, I will lay down my life for you. And then he denied him 3 times. He went out and wept bitterly. So Peter was humbled, and now he has stayed humble. He's not going to boast and say he's going to sacrifice himself again. He says, Yea, Lord, you know I have an affection for you. And Jesus says, then feed my sheep. And the word feed here means like to tend a flock or to keep sheep. And it's not little lambs, but it's sheep. It's those that have taken up the cross and followed him a while. It's those that have grown as Christians, more mature Christians. And Jesus says, shepherd them, take care of them, lead them, guide them. And the third time, so we'll read verse 17.
He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Judah, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved because he said unto him the third time, Lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus saith unto him, Feed my sheep.
So the third time that Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? Jesus used the word phileo. And so now he used a lesser word. He came down to Peter's plane. He says, do you love me with a brotherly love? Do you have an affection for me? And that hurt him. That hurt Peter. He was grieved because Jesus had to stoop down to his level and use his word. But Peter, he's still not ready to climb up. He says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And he used the word phileo again. So he feels this is the best that he can do. And he knows the Lord knows his heart. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. And this word feed here is the same word as feed my little lambs. So even mature Christians still need to be fed. And so it also grieved Peter that the Lord asked him 3 times. So why would this grieve him? What would this remind him of? When he denied him 3 times. And so a threefold denial requires a threefold confession. And then Jesus restored him. And Jesus gave him his commission 3 times. And so Peter had close fellowship with Jesus. He walked with him for 3.5 years. But that night, around a little fire of coals in the courtyard of the palace, he broke his fellowship with him. He denied him. And so now, around a little fire of coals by the Sea of Galilee, his fellowship is restored, and Jesus puts him back into his service. So here we see the requirement and the motivation to serve him, and that is to love him. And so it's good to know the right doctrine and the right creed, but salvation is a love thing. And if you don't love him, then you don't have a thing. You don't have anything. Because if you don't love him, then you don't know him. And so look at the question. Jesus didn't ask him, do you fear me? Do you honor me? He didn't say, Simon, how much did you cry that night when you went out and wept bitterly? Or how many times have you fasted? How much tithes have you paid? He didn't say, Simon, do you realize now how important it was when I told you to watch and to pray? He didn't say, are you going to stop relying on yourself now? Or he didn't say, do you believe my words now that I told you all, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the 3rd day rise again? And he didn't say, Simon, son of Jonas, will you now confess me? He didn't ask him any of those, but he said, Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me? So if we love him, we'll sing that song, we'll play the piano in church, we'll teach that lesson, we'll cook the homecoming meal, we'll do stuff for the kids, we'll give someone something that needs it, we will take someone some food, we'll go witness to that person. So if we love him, we will serve him.